The space game. That's how Todd Howard has described Starfield. Bethesda Game Studios is one of the most successful developers in the industry, with the Elder Scrolls and revamped Fallout series being beloved for their dedication to simulation. Starfield takes those core tenets, it modernizes them, and expands the scope to span a galaxy. One filled with over 1,000 planets, some of the best lighting I've ever seen, and a main storyline that's up there as one of my favorites of all time. It's polished to a sheen in a way that no prior Bethesda Game Studios title has been, showing off the benefit of the extra time afforded to it after Xbox's acquisition of ZeniMax. They've done the impossible and lived up to the hype, so let's get into it in the XboxEra review of Starfield. Back in June of 2018, we got our first tease of Starfield. A glimpse of a planet from space, a satellite, and then a jump to another world as everything turned white. This exploration is the heart of Starfield's universe, and I'll mark any mechanical spoilers later on, but I will keep as much story stuff completely out of this video as possible. The premise of the game is a simple one. Early on, you come across an artifact made out of unknown materials. Tasked with removing it from planetary bedrock, you're stunned when you wrest it free, and tasked with returning it to Constellation. This begins your journey across the galaxy to hunt more and more artifacts, fight or join pirates, defend the people or rob them blind, and do so much more that it would take me 10,000 words just to describe all of the various quests I've found. You are pretty immediately given freedom to go where you can and do what you want. This is still an RPG first, despite its solid feeling combat. To cycle back a bit though, after being knocked out from taking that piece out, you'll awaken and be asked to fill out your work profile. It's yet another clever Bethesda Game Studios way to ground your character creation with the in-game lore. There are 40 base character appearances to choose from as a starting point, and I'm terrible at fashioning a good-looking in-game character, so I mostly stuck with preset parts. You do have the option to mold and shape various facial features and add in skin blemishes, tattoos, jewelries, and a whole lot more. It's a very deep system that should only improve with mods over time. But for those of us who are just fine with playing things a bit vanilla, there's still a bevy of tools here on option to make the intrepid Constellation member of your dreams. This carries over to the new background and trait systems. Backgrounds will start you out with 3 starting perks, and these are bonuses you can choose from whenever you level up, and there'll be more on that later. Each background offers up a selection of 3 different perks, and my choice of Combat Medic gave me 10% extra pistol damage, better healing stats, and a bit more health to start the game. This background choice can also offer up additional dialogue choices you'll make later in the game. As a Combat Medic, I was able to speak on the level with various doctors I would run into, occasionally getting my preferred outcome with a little less work than it might have taken otherwise. Traits are more unique though. Instead of pulling from the leveling system, they give you up to 3 intrinsic status effects. There's a give and take on these, as for example the Kid Stuff perk. Choosing this will give you a set of parents whose appearance is based on your character. They live in an apartment in the main city on New Atlantis, and you can visit and spend time with them throughout the game. The downside is that after every 7 in-game days, you'll send them 2% of your credits. And I loved how these traits allowed me to further shape my character to match the type of person I wanted to be, and they are completely optional. I don't know if you can add them later on, but there are ways to remove them in-game if you want. Once your character is made, and for me it took around an hour of tinkering and making tough choices, the adventure begins. You're quickly thrust into action, and on both console and especially PC, it feels incredible. BGS titles have never been known for having the best feeling combat or movement, but Starfield features excellent combat even at 30 FPS on Series X or S. Like previous Bethesda titles, Starfield can be played from first or third-person perspective. I played in first person for the majority of my playthrough, especially when I was in combat, and would mostly use third person during exploration. A worry I had going in is the fact that the game only runs at those 30 frames per second on both series consoles. Thankfully, it is a damned smooth 30 thanks to an excellent use of motion blur, in that it rarely, if ever, dropped. I put roughly 5 hours in on the Series X version and a couple on Series S, and if I hadn't been spoiled by my far too expensive PC, I would have had no issue continuing on either. We'll get to the RPG systems in a bit, but once you've leveled up and found some solid weapons, Starfield goes from being an okay to good shooter into becoming a truly fantastic one. For me, I think it's a massive improvement from both Fallout 4 and 76 in pretty much every way. On console, it's smooth, aim acceleration feels damn good right out of the box, and the aim assist is just strong enough to help but not hinder. On console, you'll have the classic setup of left trigger to aim and right trigger to shoot. Right bumper is for your equipped throwables, be it mines, grenades, or more. The left bumper brings up your scanner on a tap and toggles your flashlight on a hold. You'll use the D-pad to cycle through your various favorited items. Pressing in any direction will slow down time and allow you to swap weapons, activate buffs, or use any equipable item. On PC, you'll use the Q button to activate this menu, or you can use 1 through 9 and even the bracket keys as shortcuts. Where the game differs from most shooters is that Y is your jump button, while A activates whatever you're aiming at, such as doors or starting conversations with NPCs. Tapping X is a reload, while holding it will lower your weapon. B enters you into crouch mode, and pressing it while running, and that's clicking in the left stick of course, can activate a combat slide, if you've unlocked it in your skill tree. Finally, a click of the right stick will activate your melee, and bopping a pirate on the noggin to finish them off is always satisfying. If you activate your weapon while nothing is equipped, you can put up your dukes and start punching any and everyone. There are multiple unarmed perks available in the skill tree that help you get your inner Jack Johnson on, sending enemies flying as you uppercut them straight to hell. Your weapons, heals, buffs, resources, and more are all tied to a mass system. This renamed weight system can vary depending on the gravity of the planet that you're currently on. I could hold hundreds of resources on a moon and barely anything on some of the larger planetoids. And gravity will also greatly affect your boost pack. You use that by pressing the jump button while you're in the air to activate it, and depending on the strength of the gravity around you, that could mean you zip up a few inches or a few dozen feet. I invested in my jetpack power early and on to avoid the melee rushing pirates and furious alien creatures, and to help aid in traversing the massive planets that quests or curiosity compelled me to visit. That enemy variety is fairly high, with barely any flying enemies to be found, which is great. Multiple human factions may or may not be looking to kill you at any given time, with the Spacer and Ecliptic mercenary factions being your main constant humanoid threats. Roughly 10% of the planets or so are supposed to have life, and those that do are a mix of hostile and non-threatening flora and fauna. One enormous departure from previous BGS titles is that you can no longer loot or strip dead NPCs of their equipped items. It was shocking as I spoke to industry friends who were reviewing this game as well, but you no longer loot items directly off a corpse. Loot generally matches what they were using, but you don't always get all of it, and when you do take it, they remain fully clothed, kind of like they're a loot chest now. It's kind of weird, but it is what it is. And those loot types are weapons, helmets, spacesuits, jetpacks, apparel, resources, ammo, and the ever-friendly miscellaneous. Gone are the days of multiple armor slots, and now you essentially just have 4, though only a few pieces of apparel that I found actually offered any stat increases. Let us start with weapons. There are various pistols, submachine guns, shotguns, assault rifles, single and auto, various laser versions of all of those, grenade launchers, particle beams, swords, daggers, axes, bunches of different mag weapons, laser variants of some of those, and other heavy weapons, and more. Do not make the mistake, though, that I did, and keep using a weapon for more than 5 or so levels. The damage numbers start pretty small, roughly 5 to 20, and ramp up big time once you start getting into the teens level-wise. I had the same gun twice, and I was using the old one that I had gotten at level 7. And now the level 20 version of that was doing 234 damage compared to the 20 that my equipped one was using. I've heard a few complaints from my colleagues about enemies feeling a bit squishy, and I felt the same way until I realized just how important, of course, it was to keep an eye on my damage output on my weapons. There are also a lot of types of ammunition, including multiple shotgun shells that only work for specific models. But thankfully, your ammo never adds any mass to your inventory, and after 30 hours or so, I was a veritable walking America with nearly 20,000 rounds stowed away on my character. Helmets, spacesuits, and jetpacks all offer up a variety of damage and elemental hazard reduction, as well as potential random perks based on the quality of the weapon. This applies to weapons as well, and you'll find white, blue, purple, and gold versions for each equipment type. Like all BGS titles, each item has a weight and value, and using the fast travel system to sell or store items will be a constant. It's not the easiest inventory system to use if you are a pack rat, but honestly, it's really tough to be one when the encumbrance system is so prevalent. You can't fast travel if you're carrying too many items, and boy, are you going to fast travel a ton in Starfield. There's a reason the game requires an SSD on PC and of course on console. And after beating the game and exploring dozens of star systems, thank God that it does. The Creation Engine 2 is still working on cells, and those cells mean when you move into or out of an area, you're hit with a loading screen. On Xbox, this means a few seconds most of the time, with the timer being slightly less on my beefy PC. Every time you visit somewhere, you unlock the ability to immediately fast travel to it. Visiting an area for the first time means either hoofing it or, more likely, fast traveling back to your current vessel. Once you're sitting in the cockpit of your ship, holding down a button begins the animation to head into space around your current planet or moon. But it is not No Man's Sky, as you will never want to fly from surface to planet or vice versa. And I never even bothered trying because the space between any object in space itself is so vast and you travel so slow in there that I can't imagine would ever take less than a few days, if not weeks of real time to attempt it. So I look forward to the modders or the people who know their console commands making their ship super fast so we can see if you can do it or not. Even after buying the most expensive engine I could, it was nowhere near the speed of light while just trucking around. And each flying zone is its own localized play zone. One complaint I can see people making is just how many times the exploration of the game is tied to loading screens. It isn't that seamless Red Dead Redemption style where you ride a horse for a while, get to a town, walk into a bar, and sit down without ever fading to black. It didn't bother me, as the true exploration is down on the various planet surfaces, as you use your scanner to track the local resources, plants, and animals, and find procedurally placed, handcrafted areas of interest. Because of this constant loading, though, this game would be a nightmare on last generation consoles or computers that do lack an SSD. As we're talking about the ship, let's get into how it works a bit. The new shipbuilding system is complex and deep, and it is tied to the progression tree in multiple ways. I tried my hand at crafting a few vessels, but defaulted to ones I'd either taken by killing their crew or won through hard-fought quest chains. Your ships can be enormous, and they are their own cells as well. You can never go directly from your ship into the world or leave it to go out into space, as leaving it to go to a planet or somewhere you've docked is once again a loading screen. You are on the move a ton in the game, and the quality of life around that is excellent. Instead of having to get up from your seat every time, walk to the hatch, and leave, there's just a button prompt while you're in your pilot's seat to exit the ship, undock, or stand up. I did not find a way to decorate my ship like I could an outpost or an apartment, which was a little bit disappointing. I hope I just missed it. Space combat is a bit of a resource balancing dance, and one that I found oddly easier with a controller. While ground-based combat definitely benefits from aiming with a mouse, I found it a lot tougher to rein in the various control schemes while in a ship. You'll control your thrusters with the left stick and aim with the right. Up is up and down is down, which did take a little bit of getting used to, but I did. Invariably though, you'll be forced into space fights, and that's where the power allocation system comes in. It's not the deepest system, and I found it harder to manage in real time on a keyboard, but it added just enough complexity to keep things interesting. Each weapon, your engine, shields, and grav drive all have meters that you'll control the energy output of. How much those meters fill and the amount of energy available is tied to your quality of each part and your reactor. Unlocking the best in each slot again taps into the leveling and perk system. And even after beating the main quest and most of the bigger side content, I feel like I had kind of barely touched the potential of the shipbuilding and upgrade system. Let's shift over to the heart of any good RPG, and that is how that leveling is handled. Starfield uses the tried and true experience system of most games. Every time you fill up the XP bar, you gain a little bit of health and gain a skill point. These skill points are used to unlock perks in 5 different categories. They are the physical tree, which is all about your strumph and athleticism. Social, so you can use that charming personality better. Combat, which is helping you feel more alive by being better at killing. Science, which helps you craft, create, and think better. And your tech, which gets you ship shape by shaping up your ship. Every tree has a number of perks in it, and each perk has 4 available levels. At first, you'll only have access to the first of 4 rows in each category. And to open up the rest, you'll need to spend a set amount of points in each one. To unlock every upgrade in a single slot, you'll need to complete 3 levels of challenges like kill 10 enemies in stealth or persuade 5 people based on that perk. This ends up being one of the main carrots on this RPG stick, and as my lust for a better jetpack meant, I was always keeping an eye on the challenge meters going up in the tech tree so that I could add more skill points as I gain them. I have not seen a way to remove a skill point though. I honestly haven't actually looked for it either. These points are crucial to how you can interact with various people and items. Want to use a digipick to crack an advanced or higher safe? That requires skill points. And that digipick unlocking minigame is a solid little puzzle replacement for the tried and true lockpicking systems of older BGS titles. You'll have 2 circles with gaps, and you'll need to find the right combination of shapes in the order with which to fill them in. Want to avoid combat or paying extra or even just anything else? You'll need to use the new persuasion system to try and sweet talk your way through. And it's an okay, if not terribly deep system. Every persuasion interaction has a set number of successful points you need to earn in a set amount of moves. For fewer points, you'll have a higher chance of success, with skill points upping those chances further if you've spent them. Most of the time, it barely made sense what did and didn't work words-wise, and instead it was just a roll of the dice on if your percentage hit or not. I maxed it out and found myself able to, with only a little bit of save scumming, get my desired outcomes on some of the most critical discussions in my game. Outside of that, dialogue is a mix of various responses that make it nice and obvious if you're being nice, neutral, a complete prick, or somewhere in between when you talk with people. There are over 3 million lines of dialogue in Starfield. Choices you make matter, and the consequences will never be the same. In between the hot and heavy action segments, you'll spend a lot of time interacting with hundreds if not thousands of different NPCs. Long quest chains for the main story, various factions, and dozens of stumbled upon side quests will find you talking with a variety of different looking and thankfully different sounding characters. The writing is stellar across the board, even occasionally being damned funny at times, as humor in games is always a bitch to pull off, and they lean into it at the right times in Starfield. It's pretty serious most of the time, though never dour in tone. Starfield is a hopeful game about exploration and discovery. You can feel it in the tones they strive for, even at the darkest of times. I can't be an asshole in games like this, as I find life to be too full of that already. I earned the trust of people and never let them down, and saw their characters grow because of it. Thanks to a little more save scumming, I did give in and played an evil jerk a few times, and the utter devastation on my companion's face was so palpable as I took a bribe from a corrupt businessman that it caused my romantic interest to refuse to even speak to me for in-game days, and I couldn't do it anymore. And while there are Radiant quests available, they are more of the you like this type of gameplay, so here's a reason to go do it and make a little bit of cash and earn some experience variety. I found myself traveling from system to system and checking random planets, as I would often just stumble into a long or short but excellent quest chain out of nowhere. NPC chatter and distress beacons will give you activities in the menu. Often these lead to long and sometimes insane quest lines that were some of the best parts of the game for me. Whether I was working for the Freestar Rangers, Busey Vanguard, or even the Crimson Raider Pirates, there was never really a dip in the quality of the narrative. It felt like my choices always mattered, and there were devastating consequences at times when I least expected them. As I rolled the credits, I felt like I had helped shape various parts of the galaxy in both good and negative ways based on my decisions. NPCs were calling me out as a hero for saving X, or a villain for failing to help Y. And this is all carried by the crew of Constellation, who I became incredibly close to over time. The first you meet is Barrett before you're introduced to so many others, and they all have interesting backstories, intriguing interactions, and once you become close enough, long quest chains to help them deal with past issues as well. It isn't groundbreaking stuff, but it's always well written and voice acted. You see a slot that each character gets put into early on, the nerdy tech, the theologian, the rich prick, and others, but that quickly gets reshaped. Added to, it ends up coming together in something that is deeply personal and moving in nature. There are possible romantic relationships as well, and seeing the smile on my partner's face every time they saw me grew to actually be kind of comforting in a weird way. I smiled back like an idiot at my TV, catching myself after a few seconds of going, "Aww." My first playthrough took me roughly 50 hours, and I still had a lot of side content to get through. Early on, I focused on the main quest before steering into side and faction stuff. The main quest can most likely be Golden Path in, roughly 20 hours or so if you're able to somehow level up often enough to keep up with things. I was level 35 by the time I beat it, and I just barely matched the areas I was heading towards. The side quest and especially the faction stuff shouldn't be ignored though. I won't spoil anything, but make sure you do not ignore distress calls, as a few of them led to some truly wild quest chains that I could have easily missed otherwise. A system in the game that I didn't interact with much at first was the base building. It feels entirely optional, and I think that's a good thing. On almost any planet, you can build up to 8 outposts at first, and the skill tree allows you to get more over time. These outposts become bases for you and your crew to work at as they gather resources that you can keep or sell for credits. You can set up off-planet trading systems and even ferry supplies between them. It's an incredibly deep system with tons of options that I barely touched until I was near the end of my first playthrough. Thankfully, it offers up either an up-close or a bird's-eye view, which makes it far easier to use than I found it in those titles. Once again, this is still an RPG, and some of the cooler sounding base building stuff is tied to the leveling tree, and I didn't get to experience all of it for myself. Finding an overlook on the moon, where I have a giant crater in front of me and Earth on the horizon, was too tempting. I set up a small base housed by one of my crew members I had picked up that had 3 stars in outpost engineering. This gave me a few more options in the building itself, and after a few hours I had a huge base fully decorated with old Earth memorabilia, a stove, crafting stations, weapon stations, and more. That decoration system carries over into the apartments that you can buy or earn as well. From what the developers have said, you can get apartments in any major city, though I only had 2 of them in New Atlantis myself. These apartments were a part of the New Atlantis cell, which meant I could go into them and then jump out of my balcony and head right down into the city with no loading, which was really neat. Decorating in a house works well enough, though I did find that rotating items could be a bit finicky on both controller or PC. Didn't always go exactly how I wanted, and I over-rotated multiple times, but it wasn't that tough to fix after making a mistake in placing an item. It's all extra and just something to add character and flavor to your game, though the mission terminals for Radiant quests or trying to take bounties off your head are a nice thing to have in your home. Speaking of which, if you commit a crime, you can expect to do some time. A few times I accidentally shot an ally during a heated space battle or pressed grab by mistake while in a high security area, and boy, did it cost me. Well, a few times it cost me a quick reload to my latest save, but when that wasn't a good option, many thousands of credits were lost to various security forces of the settled systems. At least the inside of each prison cell looked utterly fantastic, as Starfield is probably one of the best looking games I've ever played, thanks in large part to pristine texture quality and maybe the best lighting system of all time. To achieve this, Starfield utilizes a real-time global illumination system. This is most likely one of the main reasons why the game runs at what feels like a pretty locked 30 FPS on Series X and S. The X version attempts to run at a dynamic 4K and looks pristine when still, and pretty good while in movement. And that was my greatest fear, as far too often any 30 FPS mode on console lately has been either a stutterfest and or looked like it was bathed in Vaseline while moving. Excellent motion blur helps both the X and S versions of the game feel like that smooth 30 that we used to experience last generation in Destiny 1 and 2. While I did have good high hopes for the X, I am most impressed by the Series S version of the game. This little $300 box has been a punching bag lately for console warriors and media members alike. Not only does the Series S version look pretty good, it never once felt bad to play. I was dreading the cuts to fidelity it would have to make in order to run well, but outside of some pop-in issues on both consoles, I think the game looks phenomenal on these nearly 3-year-old devices. Running a 5800X CPU and a 7900 XTX GPU, I averaged between 50 and 100 FPS in major cities at 4K ultra settings. It varied heavily based on the number of NPCs, with more walking around during the day than at night. My monitor caps out at about 20 Hz, and the game hits that number often in smaller, more enclosed areas during missions. No matter where I was or what I was doing though, I was constantly stunned at how good looking the textures in this game are. Character faces are a more mixed bag quality-wise, with some looking fantastic and others looking eh. Environments, weapons, and ships though are fantastic looking pretty much no matter wherever you are. One odd thing I noticed is that both FSR 2.0 and even changing the settings seem to barely affect my frame rate. Going from ultra to low would net me at most 10 or 20 FPS, and it was similar with lowering or raising the resolution from 1080p to 4K. In the end, with its scope and scale, I think Starfield is gorgeous. I lost so many hours just staring at the horizon on various planets, going through historical museums in New Atlantis, or tending to my settlement in a lush and lively jungle world. Now, skip the next section, and I'll timestamp this for the video, if you want to avoid a few minor game mechanic spoilers. I'm going to talk about a few things, mainly, the first one is what we saw at the very end of the Starfield Direct, when the character put out his hand and it caused a rippling shockwave that caught enemies up and sent them floating out of control. So if there's one thing I recommend doing, it is getting deep enough into the main quest so that you can unlock your powers. Much like Skyrim, there are various abilities that greatly add to the game in a variety of ways. I won't go into specific ones, how you get them or why, but as you gain the first, you'll be given ways to find more, and it's totally worth it. The other thing is the game features, for the first time, New Game Plus. And I can't say how or why, but I think it works really well, and don't worry, it does not lock you into anything like any previous Bethesda title. Alright, spoiler section done. Finally, I'd like to hit on the music of Starfield. Composer Einen Zur has done a masterful job capturing the feeling of a Bethesda title within a new genre for the studio. The game's deluxe edition comes with a 79-track OST, and it is powerfully moving. Whether a cutscene, combat, or just exploring, it's fucking incredible. When I'm not playing, I'm humming it in my head or leaving the main menu. Oh, by the way, how hideous is that main menu? It's not. Open, so it can play some more. We were given the most expensive version of the game for review, which comes with an artbook application that plays the game's music as you peruse it. For the past 2 weeks, I've had either the game or that app open for nearly every second I've been awake. There are hints of Fallout and Skyrim's themes, but in the end, it's just a perfect blend of sounds that capture what I thought of when Bethesda announced they were finally making their space game. On the bug front, I had a lot of NPC pathing related bugs. Companions or enemies running into walls was kind of a constant, though it was significantly lessened by a day one patch. My version of the game, one you'll never see, was still by far the most polished BGS title I've ever played. I had 0 crashes, no quest completion issues, and in fact, the only other thing I can think of was occasionally my waypoint was pointing at the NAT system under the mast instead of at the elevator I was supposed to use. I also had a friend who had a glitch where everyone lost their hair, though that was remedied on a reload. The extra time afforded to the game was worth it. I only know how it went for me though, and I expect some hilarious bug videos to hit YouTube post-launch. In the end, my biggest issue with Starfield, and probably my only con, is a technical limitation of the engine, and that is the loading. You will load into and out of areas thousands of times, and it can hurt your exploration side of things when you're in a city or doing anything in space. One neat thing is that any pictures you take with the game's excellent photo mode will be used as backdrops for those loading screens. And I'm a terrible photographer, but I still got some great looking pictures with the tools offered. Wrapping things up into the Great Black Sea, Starfield is a new beginning, not only for Bethesda, but for Xbox as a whole. With excellent writing, stunning graphics, and thrilling gameplay, it makes the galaxy yours to explore, shape, and live in. It is a wondrous tapestry to experience your story in a way that only the best in this genre have done before.